we're going to invite you to interact with us just like we did. I want to introduce you to Adam here as we get going. Again, my name is Justin Juntunen. I'm the CEO and founder of Cedar and Stone Nordic Sauna, and we care deeply about teaching people and sort of stewarding sauna culture here in North America. Our company is committed to that in a whole bunch of different ways, and that is one of the reasons why we set up these monthly webinars to invite the movers and shakers and thought leaders and folks who are really doing great work. Adam, you are one of them. Adam, it's so exciting to have you here. Adam is the working for Therme Group, which has huge roots in Europe. You're going to see amazing pictures today of the Disney worlds of thermic bathing that live in Europe. And Adam is on a team bringing that here to the States as the COO, Chief Operating Officer of Therme. And Adam, one thing I love about you is you're sort of part of your reason for being is this commitment to make cities more fun and vibrant and inclusive. And also you have my favorite Instagram of anybody. You are just continually showing up at hot springs and bathing facilities. I really want you guys to go follow along bathing Adam. Adam, how are you today? How are things? How are you feeling about being here?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. I wish we were sitting in a hot tub or in a sauna together, but this is the second best, and it means we can have 58 friends with us from around the world. So, I'm not complaining. How are you?
I'm doing well in Duluth, Minnesota, where winters hold on and the water is always cold here. We were having a bunch of fun yesterday on our floating sauna, jumping into the harbor. And we were doing a summer photo shoot, but summer photo shoots in late April, early May are that's a generous statement here in Duluth. The water is still sub 40 degrees. So it was cold plunging proper for us during our summer shoot. I'm doing well. I'm really excited to have you here today. Everybody, here's what we're going to do. I know it looks like we're on some fancy Zoom call that seems like there's us on a stage, but here's the metaphor. We're actually around the coffee table together, and you guys are already doing it. We're seeing you chat in and use the Q&A and telling us where you're coming from. Washington State, New York, Seattle, British Columbia, New Hampshire. I saw Denver in there. I saw Fergus Falls, Minnesota in a tattoo session. If being in a tattoo session, streaming into a call about thermic bathing does not say this is an interactive space, I don't know what would. And so throughout our time today, we're actually going to ask you to lean forward and be with us and be a part of the conversation. We're going to ask you to chat in your questions. We're going to ask you to follow up on a poll. Tom, in less than 10 seconds, is going to click a button and you're going to see a button where we're going to sort of ask you a question right away. So we are going to invite you to just be in the room with us and not lean back, but lean forward and help the conversation be better. We're actually not going to save time at the end for Q&A. Q&A is happening at every minute of the whole session along the way. Okay, you guys? So we're going to do that. Tom, hit that first poll so we can have folks. We want to just get a sense of who's in the room right now. We want you to let us know, have you ever been to a public bathing facility? We say that in the broadest of ways as we can because there's so many different kinds, and you're going to hear about that today a little bit. And the numbers are rolling in right now, not surprisingly so. The numbers are swinging in the direction of more people than not. Adam, before we get into everything, give us a recent story or a favorite story of a thermic bathing, public bathing facility that you've been to, just to help kick us off.
Oh man, I'd love to. Well, hot off the presses, just last week I was in Colorado, New Mexico. And really the reason I wanted to do that is ever since I started working for Therme, and you probably have experienced this too, and many on the call may have as well, there's this kind of like, Americans don't bathe. What are you talking about? This is a European thing. This is an Asian thing. Americans have their private pool in the backyard. And I had always kind of been fascinated by the Southwest and what clearly was a tradition of hot spring bathing there. And so finally made it out there last week. Didn't have time to do the full circuit. There's a famous circuit that goes all the way around Colorado that is actually promoted and marketed and looks pretty cool. I just went to a couple of spots down on the southern border of Colorado, Durango and Pagosa, where you have some really stunning sort of hot spring circuits with, casually 40 pools, 40 pools, different temperatures. There was a cold plunge in a river with, the melting snow coming off the mountains. But the thing I found most powerful and most poetic was it was a distinctly American approach to bathing, very nestled in the landscape, very nestled into the local culture. And, there wasn't any of that sense of trying to riff or copy or mimic something from abroad. It was really an authentic American bathing experience. So loved it. And the weather was gorgeous too.
And you just always tell the story as you go along the way. And so thanks for bringing us along. I feel like I was watching you last week on that Tour de Hot Springs and just excited every time I saw another one pop up. And yeah, I mean, I think that's what we're getting into today, this sort of like, what is the North American expression of bathing? And also, how does that relate to sort of these global expressions and these bigger, maybe more long-standing historical cultural traditions? And so we're both going to look backwards in history, and we're going to look forwards to sort of what's happening and what's coming. And I think a lot of the folks who are in the room are excited about that. To come back to our poll, everybody, a resounding 93% of folks who are in the room right now have been to some type of public bathing facility. And 4 of you who haven't, 7% who haven't, we fully invite you. There's lots of resources and people in the room who would say, hey, come visit us here or there. And we're so glad you're with us in the room today. So as we go from there, you guys, we're going to stop sharing that and we're going to kind of dive right in. And let me just remind you as we go and as we kind of dive into all of these things, please, let's be engaging. Let's drop the questions in, drop the questions or the chats in, the reactions. When Adam says a quote that you're like, oh my gosh, that I need to like put that up on my wall, quote that into the chat, double down on it. So Adam, let's start here. Let's talk about sort of North America and why this is what we titled the webinar, why we think North America is really falling in love with this bathing culture and with thermic bathing culture, because there are sections where people thought, oh, American bathing culture is just a hot tub and a pool in a backyard. And we are seeing again and again, there are these communal expressions and these bigger, wider, more open expressions. Why is that so? And let's riff on that for a while. What are you seeing?
Oh, so many thoughts. I mean, first off, just one quick reflection, the jacuzzi was invented in the US. So there is definitely some authentic bathing culture, that was invented here. The Jacuzzi Brothers, I think they were called. But, that is a private expression of what bathing can be. And I think from my perspective, there are 2 huge trends happening in, whether you want to call it the recreation economy or just the economy overall, that public bathing is kind of at the intersection of. One of them is wellness and just a boom of interest in sort of wellness activities and improving one's health. And then the other is this kind of huge and growing focus on what I'll call experiential. But when I say experiential, I don't necessarily mean high-tech immersive stuff, but just being with people and experiencing things in community with people. And I think after the pandemic, there's been a huge growth in sort of both these areas. And what you're doing and what we're doing and what many I think on the call are already doing or interested in doing is playing at the intersection of those 2 spaces. And I think wellness historically maybe in the US was a bit more individualistic, maybe a little bit more isolated. It's like I meditate by myself or I'm focused on my Fitbit by myself. And so what bathing offers is something that is in community but still offers those health benefits. And then on the experiential side, I think there's also, this is clearly being driven by a sort of hunger to get off screens, right? Because we're spending so much time, like right now, on Zooms, we're glued to our phones. So I think there's this hunger to be in spaces together. But one of the ironic things, actually, is a lot of the experiential economy that is going right now is still very tech focused, right? You're in spaces surrounded by screens, you're in spaces with projection mapping. I can't wait to go to the Sphere in Las Vegas, but it is still very high tech. And so what bathing offers is actually a genuinely analog environment, a real digital detox. And I think it's the intersection of those 2 things, which is driving, so much growth, so much interest. And I don't see these as trends that are slowing down. If anything, I think it's, just at the beginning of the ramp up.
I think that's so important to highlight, that tension between the sort of desire to be off screens and then the desire to digitize our health and track our health and protocolize a lot of so there's a few of these streams happening, right? There's the spa bathhouse culture, which is very much, yeah, get rid of it and like move aside the sauna. Actually, that your iPhone doesn't work in the temperatures of the sauna. The batteries are not rated for that. You're going to avoid some warranties potentially. And then there's a whole other side of the culture of that that's sort of biohacking their way into hot and cold. And they're saying, hey, I actually do want to wear my Fitbit and Oura Ring and Whoop and say, you know what? What's happening to my body? How do you see those as two streams that are going to kind of go side by side, Adam? Are they going to commingle and exist? Are the Luddites going to totally get rid of the screens and then the tech savvy are going to, fly away into digital saunas as they go? Give me some sense there on how those two things play together in your opinion.
Well, it's interesting. I feel like my orientation on this is, the more the merrier. And I think especially Therme's vision, which is these very large facilities, if people want to come in and be very focused on their health, welcome. If people want to come in large groups and just have fun and maybe even have a cocktail, welcome as well. And it's interesting, some of the newer bathing facilities that have been opening recently, when you go in, you see both of those communities coexisting. You see kind of the groups of friends who probably this is their first time ever in a bathhouse, kind of observing the guy who's been in the cold plunge for 15 minutes, with his hat and his gloves and his ski mask, and are kind of intrigued, So I think both are probably, expanding each other's worlds in healthy ways. What I see honestly more as I don't want to call it a threat, but a parallel track is the home sauna, right? And I know that's something that you're also engaged in. So it's, that's where I see the American, inclination towards privatization, domesticity, having big houses and filling them with gadgets. And that truly is, more of a private approach. I think there was some quote I remember reading a few years ago of like, our vision is, it was from someone in Finland, like something you could only have in Finland, like the president of the Sauna Association or something like that, saying something, our vision is not for everyone on the block to have a sauna, but for the entire block to be in the sauna, right? And that, I think, ultimately is where I hope things go as well.
You know what I think is fun about that parallel of at home and in the public sphere? Because I actually think, our work is involved in both. Like we build custom residential spaces. We also operate public facilities and support people in that. And we're helping entrepreneurs start their businesses. But I think what's very interesting is we all in these American homes have kitchens and we still go out to eat time to time. And that dynamic of thinking about public bathing and saying, well, there is a place for a more social expression of dining. We all know that. I actually think there's also a space for a more public expression of bathing.
Yeah.
And there's still going to be the folks that want to make food at home. There's still going to be the folks that prefer eating in and inviting people over. And I think you're right that America does have a bent towards the sort of private moment, the individualized moment, as opposed to some other cultures that are much more open to that at the get-go. And I think that's just something to kind of consider as we're moving forward, that there's going to be a whole lot of private sauna happening more and more and more. What I don't think is true is that it means that public experiences can't happen. I think that's going to look like yoga in the next 10 years, right? Of having neighborhood yogas in every block. And then, people still do yoga at home sometimes, right? Do you want a communal setting for that? What do you think, Adam? And we're going to get to a question here in a minute. But Adam, talk to me a little bit about now this sort of movement with Huberman Lab and Rhonda Patrick and Peter Attia, who are really, they're doing the science behind it and what that's doing to the culture of this, because I think we have actually hundreds of years, if not thousands of years of cultural wisdom, why these things are good, right? And why these things are good for humans. Now we have science to back that up, and it is really beginning to move the needle. Let's talk for a little bit about sort of that scientific sauce that maybe also Americans really want to track the health components of it. What are you thinking about on that regard?
Well, ultimately, I really think anything that helps to grow the audience is great, you know? And if it's people who need that kind of validation, who are interested in that science, I think that's fantastic. And then that can be a gateway into understanding sauna maybe as a more social activity, even if they'd initially perceived it more as this, you know, biohacking, individual optimization type of activity. So the fact that these, you know, thought leaders have big audiences and probably are reaching people who wouldn't have thought of themselves as the type to go to a banya because it looks a little grimy, you know, I think that's great. And I just want to shout out someone who's here with us, Alan from Toronto, from Kivia Sauna. He wrote a beautiful op-ed last month. I think it was in the Toronto publication about exactly this issue, right? That there's an art of sauna, you know, he would call it sauna. I know you do too. That's been going for thousands of years, and it's a kind of inherited social and cultural wisdom. And, you know, if you make it too much about the metrics and too much about the optimization, you actually lose some of that cultural sort of aspect. And also, obviously, there's a lot of scientific research now that shows that, you know, being with people is actually incredibly good for your health. So that's very much related to medical benefits. And so, you know, I think I would just come back to this idea of growing the audience is always a good thing. There was one other thing I was just going to say I realized about like why I'm excited for the growth of bathing in the US and in North America generally. And you and I and Leo, who's also here, were on a panel about this last month talking on this theme. But the US is incredibly culturally diverse, right? And I think that actually means that there's a certain kind of openness to sort of exploring parallel cultures, parallel ways of doing things. I'm thinking of like, you know, the Korean bathhouses that have taken off in a lot of US cities. And when you go in them, you know, Koreans might be only 20% of the people there. Increasingly, that's happening with Russian banyas as well. I think there's just a sort of openness to experimentation. And at the same time, I think there's an openness to innovate with concepts that maybe in the home culture are seen as a bit more sacred or a bit more inviolable. And I think that's actually what's going to contribute to a huge amount of new sort of transformation, experimentation with some of these base ingredients of sauna and bathing, because we're in a cultural environment where that sort of cultural mixing is celebrated and can actually happen maybe more easily than in Finland or in South Korea or in Russia or in Japan, where there's maybe more of a purist orientation and a sense of heritage that should not be, you know, violated.
I think that's really important because, and I'll say this a little frank at the beginning. I think America has a great ability to culturally appropriate cultural gifts, right? And commodify them and extract the good from them. And I think what we're seeing is a whole lot of places that are actually trying to honor and learn from those traditions and contextualize it to new audiences and new people and new bathers who actually don't have. You mentioned Alan and we're two people who have too many vowels in their last name because we have Finnish last names. And, you know, he and I grew up with a tradition that was quite literally gifted to us as kids. I don't remember my first sauna. That's like an interesting thing, right? And we say the word in the way that the word came from Finland, not in the way that it gets pronounced often in sauna. I never reprimand people, but I'm always caring about people getting the real cultural dish, the right food, the right ingredients, prepared the right way. And I really think that it's going to be interesting to see how those things get contextualized to American audiences, because so many of these initial bathing spaces, and you know this, Adam, on the history side, were almost safe spaces for ethnic communities. They were the spot where the Russian banya was the space for if you had moved to a new continent, you had a spot where you could be yourself and not need to be an American in a new land. The Korean spa, similar. The Finnish sauna and the public saunas that dotted the Midwest, and we had 8 to 10 of them here in our little city of Duluth, Minnesota. 100 years ago, we had more public saunas than per capita than any other spot that I know of. And that is really interesting as those things now are being contextualized to new audiences. I want to bring up a question here because people are starting to talk about all this in the chat. The chat is just
the chat is blowing
you guys.
up.
Great work. And one of the questions that Colin's asking, he said, hey, I read this week about Meow Wolf co-founder opening up a spa bathhouse here in Austin, Texas, and it's set to be huge, 26,000 square feet, and bathed in tech and AI. What do you know about this, and how will places like this shape the U.S. landscape? Colin, great question. There's a lot of sauna coming to Texas, a lot of bathhouses coming to Texas. I actually know Corvus. I've met him on a couple of calls. He's doing great work. And he's one of these people who are thinking deeply about, how do I contextualize an experience and not simply provide a authentic meal from another culture. He's trying to do something new. It's a very creative project. Whereas I think other people are doing very much like, we're going to import the best of the culture. I think of what Leo's done at World Spa, and it is the amazing sort of example of, you can do the world tour of bathing all in one facility at World Spa. And I think there's going to be, Colin, people who are choosing both of those paths. Let's take the best from the world and let's bring them here and provide them at high quality. And there's other folks that are going to say, we're going to create from it something new. Adam, where do you see Therme kind of fitting in that? And this might be your layup to go to some slides in a moment. I don't know. You might sort of take us there in a moment to sort of visualize some of these things. But what are you seeing in terms of that iterative, creative process to bring new into bathing culture right now?
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to quickly say on Submersive and the Austin project, I'm really excited about what they're experimenting with there and what Corvus is doing. Obviously, Meow Wolf has been an absolute leader in experiential. And, you know, when I first heard that he was thinking of integrating that with bathing, I just thought, brilliant, this is going to definitely be on the cutting edge. And even what I've read about the layout, that you go into this central space and move into side spaces, I think the journey aspect is going to be very, very well thought through. And no one will integrate technology into this better than probably, you know, someone with his background. In terms of Therme, I think there's a few things that really set us apart. And I'll ask Tom or you to bring up the slides in one moment. But I think the two that really come to mind for me, one is scale. These are very, very large facilities, and they're positioned really to serve a region, a sort of metropolitan region. And that's kind of going back to the idea of the ancient Roman baths, when you think of the baths of Caracalla and, you know, some of those images you might have seen when you were a kid of like what ancient Rome was like. You know, the bathhouse was the core urban infrastructure next to the temple and the marketplace right in the middle of the city. And it was built for thousands of people to be in at once. And that's something that Therme is trying to sort of recover and bring back. The second thing is a real focus on nature. And you can actually see an image behind me of one of the saunas in our Romanian facility. There's over 1,000 mature trees growing indoors in our facilities. And this relates to, you know, I think a very important aspect of well-being, particularly in urban areas, is what people call biophilia, that kind of connection to nature, exposure to nature, seeing green spaces, seeing blue spaces, something that city dwellers often, you know, don't get enough of. And actually vitamin D, most of our facilities are, you know, these kind of glass enclosed spaces. So you are really feeling like you're outdoors, even though you're indoors. So maybe if you want to pull up the slides, I can show just a couple of images that help sort of explain our bathing concept. And I think, you know, what's exciting about all the different concepts that are coming up right now is there's so much range in terms of scale and approach. And I think there's room for all of this and more. You know, I think we get stronger based on what you're doing. And I think, you know, small and medium-sized facilities get more audience because of what we hope to do. So this is just an image of, you know, our sort of main adult bathing environment. It's called the Palm. You can have 200, 300 people in that pool at one time. And, you know, it's kind of at the intersection, again, of a wellness environment, but also a very social, a very fun, a very, you know, in the evening, quite high energy environment. We're open till midnight, you know, even 1 a.m. sometimes. And, you know, it shows, I think, the flexibility of a concept like this to in the morning be kind of a health environment. And then as you transition into evening to become more of a sort of entertainment and even a nightlife environment. Yes, this is the one in Bucharest. I saw a question there. This is the same sauna that I'm virtually sitting in at night. And I think one of the other things that Therme, has done very well, and the company's been around in one form or another for over 20 years. I've only been engaged for 4 or 5, is finding ways to grow that audience for sauna and bathing through creating experiences that have a sense of spectacle and have a sense of awe. And I think one of the things I love sort of observing when I go in our facilities in Europe is, I think probably 50% of the people coming would not characterize themselves bathing aficionados. They are just there to have fun. And the health benefits are delivered as kind of like a side product of them just wanting to have fun with their friends. We do have some saunas that are, more traditional in terms of having a banya feel or are hotter or are more enclosed. This is one of the ones that does have this amazing view out onto the bathing environment. And if you go to the next slide, every one of our facilities in Europe is actually powered by a geothermal well. So there was a geothermal well drilled specifically for this project that supplies the water and the heat. This is actually a LEED Platinum building, which for a facility of glass and steel that welcomes 1.5 million people a year is a pretty extraordinary thing. And it's something we're very focused on as we look into the US market. How can we maintain that environmental standard? And then if you go to point 5, slide 5, this kind of relates again to the idea of, bringing new audience into cold plunge and into bathing, who if they saw a freezing cold pool that is marked, that has ice cubes in it, they probably wouldn't get in. But this is what our cold plunge looks like. It's a cold shower, and it's very welcoming. And we are now thinking in our future facilities to integrate a range of cold experiences. But the idea is to deliver this concept for as many people as possible. And we're confident that probably, a good chunk of the ones who experience this will say, okay, now I want to go to the next level. Now I want to go jump into a lake in Duluth, And we are delighted that we can have that pipeline effect or that gateway effect. And then maybe just the last slide as a final point, one of the things we've been thinking about a lot as we come into the US is the issue of cultural diversity. And this is actually just an image from a recent brand photo shoot that we've done to communicate what our concept would look like in the States, serving a more diverse audience. Romania is, an incredibly culturally homogenous white, place. And so we want to make sure that this is not perceived as some foreign European concept, but as a community infrastructure that's serving everyone. And that's one of the things I love most about going to bathing facilities in the US today is they are serving a really, really diverse audience, both in terms of race and ethnicity, but actually also in terms of age. And that's something that, we have family areas, we have things for kids. Ensuring children have well-being is also very, very important.
Adam, there's so many things I want to comment on here. And one is just this piece of scale is, I think, really important for the US to see and say, hey, the version of this that is so privatized, that is maybe the only thing that people's imaginations have seen, isn't the only way. And you drawing on this like very deep historical background all the way back to the Roman baths. And then also, I think we have this bathhouse culture here in the States too, that has a bit bigger of a scale and in some ways lived on and in some ways went away. I'm thinking about your recent hot springs trips throughout the Southwest. It looked oddly similar in terms of sprawling pools with numbers of people. And I would just double down on this. I think we're going to have a lot of different expressions of this. And maybe why we're starting here with this sort of creative experience of all these sorts of things is we really believe the sauna is a really flexible space. We're going to talk about that more in a minute. But that flexibility includes small and large. We have Caleb in the chat Q&A asking, how can I create a Nordic sauna business in a small town that needs to be convinced of its benefits? Oh my goodness, Caleb, I have so many thoughts there. We have blog posts written. We'll send you a link on that. We have people doing this in very, very small towns that are opening up businesses that are, like you were saying, Adam, I think just rising all tides. And more people are getting used to the idea. And just like this being a cold plunge, I think so often the American version of any sort of bathing culture as it relates to hot and cold, it comes from a place of fitness in the gym. They really see these things as another piece of workout equipment. Mm-hmm. And so when they talk about sauna, they think, well, I need to be the wrestler who's making weight. I need to like endure the heat. But everything I see about the pictures you're providing is not about enduring, but about enjoying. It's about entertaining. It's about a lively, exciting pageantry sort of environment. It's inspiring. And I wonder if you'd maybe just talk to that really quickly around this dynamic of helping people be not enduring the heat or enduring the cold, but being captivated by excitement and beauty and fun and vibrance.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even though this is a European concept and Therme originated, very much out of a German tradition of these large scale, family-friendly bathing environments, I think one of the things that immediately I think resonates with an American audience is, where was the theme park created? That's about as American as apple pie. And there is an aspect of the spectacle, the technology, the scale, being with thousands of people, music festivals, going to Vegas. I mean, there's aspects here that really resonate with, I think, an American love of spectacle and of recreation. And I think, in fact, if you lean too heavily on sort of the stern austerity or the medical, this is a medical thing, you're going to lose the much bigger opportunity, which is every single human that I know enjoys just being in hot water with their friends and their family, and creating environments that are big enough for people to understand this is not a private thing, this is not a gym thing, this is actually a sort of communal, almost like there's an aspect of a festival nature to it. I think that's where the opportunity really lies. But what's wonderful about bathing, and I think we can get into this topic if you want, is the flexibility, right? It's such a flexible space, and it can be for one person, it can be for 1,000 people. So I know you wanted to steer us there. I'll let you take us there if you want.
I think we're there, Adam. Let's go. We were on a call, we were prepping for this, and we kept coming back to just this belief that the sauna is it's one of the more flexible rooms that exist in architecture and in human connection, right? And it's because so many different kinds of interacting can happen there. I'll let you sort of start us there because those were some observations you were making, and I was like, I'm in. I say that all the time. I think about that all the time. Adam, give us talk about the flexibility you see in the space.
Well, I think, when I started working for Therme, one of the things we were doing at the very outset was working on our communications and how do we engage with city governments? How do we engage with media? How do we engage in the longer term with consumers? Though in the US, we're still a few years from that. And one of the things that we really struggled with was this issue of, okay, we're for families, but we're also for adults. We're open during the week, but we're also open on the weekend. We're very active in the day, but we also have a nightlife element. We're about wellness, but we're also about fun. And, ultimately what I came to realize is kind of hanging our hat too much on one of these actually got away from the fundamental power and opportunity of this concept, which is its incredible flexibility. And that you could go there on a Monday morning or on a Saturday night, have a completely different experience with a completely different group of people, and it's still the same space. And, we enable that through scale. But I think what many other, aspiring sauna entrepreneurs and people who've opened bathhouses, have been doing is maybe focusing in on one aspect and anchoring their vision about one particular permutation of what a bathhouse can be. And I think that's what makes me so confident that we are just at like the very beginning of a huge wave. And, some people might think the pie is like this. I think the pie is like way off the screen in terms of the potential of all of this. And what's inspiring is you see people coming from very specific backgrounds, often not from wellness, and infusing their vision of a bathhouse with whatever their passion is. So a few weeks ago, I was talking to the founder of the Washington Baths. It's in Portland, Maine. I'm going next month. I'm really excited. He comes out of like an art and music background, and he's imagining the bathhouse essentially as a space of cultural experimentation. He's been like commissioning experimental musicians to compose music specifically for the sauna. I think he was telling me about like a 7-track electronic composition where one stream is playing in the lockers, another's playing in the sauna, another's playing in the restaurant, another's playing in the pool area, all creating this immersive experience. Then obviously you have Corvus and Meow Wolf infusing this more experiential, futuristic, tech-forward vision. Then you have people who are more interested in the health aspect. So, some of you may know about Othership. I view this as going at it more from the health angle. They've got a breathwork app that integrates with the bathing experience. There are people who are more interested in the art aspect. So, Team Lab is this Japanese art collective that created a sauna in Tokyo that was all about commissioning art specifically to experience in the sauna. But I could go on and on. I mean, there's like infinite permutations of this. And whether you're kind of doing it all in one space like Therme, or the more kind of like scattered innovation that's happening across the sort of bathing world, I think that there's so many more, there's food, I still think there's so much that we can push the food integration. There's children, there's so much that's still to be explored.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think the way that I often talk about that with people is, and I'll use the word sauna. I know we're thinking of lots of different facilities, but to me, the sauna it's not the meal in which we eat. It's not the recipe. The sauna is actually the table we sit at. And if we desire, we can cook a whole bunch of different recipes to enjoy while sitting at the table with humans. And there are some experiences that we see really commonly, right? That people tend to do. They tend to create this type of meal in the space. And there are some that haven't even been thought of yet, right? The Asian fusion restaurant, combining two things and saying, hey, we're starting to see those. But at our facilities, we see folks booking the bachelorette party for the most fun, gregarious, enlivened moment of the month, right? They have big special occasions. We see folks booking private sessions for, them and their loved ones to celebrate and have a really nice moment. We see folks that are wanting that third space in their community, and they're coming sort of to do a hard thing, but to be with all their friends. And the next session, we see folks booking to quite literally grieve the loss of a loved one, a parent, a child, right? And so in the sauna, in those same rooms, you have the biggest celebrations and you have the deepest pains that people walk into those spaces with. And that is true of restaurants. That's true of our lives. And I think the sauna is just such a human act. These bathing cultures are so human that if we do them well, we're actually opening the door to do all of those things in those spaces. Now, as a business, you might want to look and say, hey, here's our best selling entrees at the restaurant, right? And sure, we're going to do those. But the seasonal menu, the creative local ingredients, hey, let's work with a local artist and do something more deeply immersive here for this moment. That's the part where it's like, the sky is so wide and blue and vast, like we haven't even scratched the surface yet around those types of things. I just think we're in it for so much fun ahead to create those things. And a lot of the people in the room right now are people who are already asking those questions. So thanks, folks, for doing that. Thanks for kind of leaning in on this stuff. I'm seeing such great sort of things going on in the chat. I want to come to that in a second here. Adam, when you think about the flexibility of the space, and that sort of sauna as third space, sauna as entertainment, sauna as amusement park at Therme scale, what is that thing you haven't seen yet that you're really hoping to see? And maybe it's on your list, because I know you're a guy who has sort of the bucket list of sauna experiences and it is going to happen. But is there anything you're really like, could somebody just create this combo for me that I'm looking for?
That's fun. The one I was just thinking about is the food aspect, and how can food be integrated in a really thoughtful way? I don't think we want people eating in a sauna necessarily, but how can we create a kind of food environment that is so seamlessly integrated with the bathing journey, and design menus and use ingredients in ways that help to, I guess, resonate with what your body is also experiencing from a chemical perspective as you go through a bathing circuit. And that's something that Therme is actually very focused on. We have an amazing food and beverage team based in the UK that actually has done, food strategy for the Olympics and for a lot of, very large scale events. So for us, it's also about, how to achieve scale while also having that sort of customized element. But that's something that I'm quite interested in. And then, you know, I'm actually interested in how sauna can also be a sort of layer in events that have multiple other aspects. And I'll give you an example. In Oslo, some of you may know there's a kind of pop-up in the downtown called Salt, which is a kind of music slash food slash wellness festival. I haven't been, but it seems to be operating for much of the year. And it's using sauna as one ingredient in a sort of public gathering place. So it's kind of like in the US, you know, 15, 20 years ago, there were food trucks that started booming, and you started seeing food trucks turning up at nightclubs and food trucks turning up on corporate campuses and food trucks turning up at music festivals and so on. I think there's a big opportunity for sauna to start to play that sort of, it's like an additional ingredient in the complement of what brings people together. And it might not be the central focus, but it helps to sort of enhance the entire experience of what people might be doing anyway. I know Burning Man, there's been a lot of experimentation with saunas and steam and bathing. You know, it would be interesting to know if Coachella and other festivals are starting to play with that as well, because I think there's a huge potential in terms of bringing people together in environments where there are large numbers of strangers and helping to facilitate that social bonding, but not having to be like the star of the show. You know, the star of the show is still going to be Beyonce on stage or whoever it is.
We're having folks in the chat say, Salt is awesome! Exclamation, exclamation. Just rode my bike past there and they were salsa dancing outside the sauna. If that is not a fusion of experiences and flavors of salsa dancing and sauna in Oslo, I mean, that is right on. And I want to highlight Greg. Greg, thank you. Greg sending a bunch of amazing links here. Greg, I don't know if you're involved with Sauna Channel, but I love your work. You're sending a bunch of links to a lot of the sort of video documentary style stuff that's going on, specific for Therme Bucharest, specific for Salt, you know, a bunch of other things. Greg, if you are involved, come visit us in Duluth. Let's do some episodes together. And with Adam and all the things he's creating here. We're gonna do something, Adam, where we're gonna do another poll here. And so Tom's on our tech side. We're gonna launch another one here, you guys. I want to know, we're having a lot of questions happening right now around sauna as business, and we're gonna shift gears. There are gonna be some things there. So respond to this one for me. In what way are you interested in the business of sauna? Hey, I love supporting as a sauna enthusiast. I'm like Adam, and I am like going to every spa and thermic spot I can. There's maybe the second group is I'm thinking about starting a business. I'm here in research mode. I'm processing. Or there's somebody who's, hey, I'm currently running something. I'm actually operating it. It's up and running, or things are moving in that direction. We want to know sort of what's the spread in the room around that. And as we get folks' responses here, I want to start hitting a couple of these questions, because we're starting to get into the nitty-gritty of all the stuff that's going on here. Jim's asking a really great question, and Jim, I'm going to answer parts of it, and I'm also going to punt you to a couple other things. Jim's asking, what type of problems / licensing from creating a sauna-style public space can I expect from local city regulators, et cetera? For a setup of multiple units versus brick and mortar facility, can you implement a portable changing room, restrooms, et cetera? Jim, I love it. You're asking a hugely creative question. And we are working with folks, and I'm going to hit a couple of things in a little bit, who are doing these small pop-up, unique, rentable, transportable experiences on up to folks that are looking at tens to multiple tens of thousands of square footage in terms of bathhouses. And we're working with them either as friends and giving them digital high fives as they launch spaces, or we're working with them maybe more specifically and helping them launch and training and design and architecture and a whole bunch of support along the way. You're going to hear about that in a minute. Our next webinar next month is actually talking a lot about this as it relates to business models. So your question there was a specific one about business models, and there's some licensing questions. I'm going to come back to it in a second. Our poll has jumped up here that we finished. Wow, great work, you guys. We have a whole bunch of folks in the room. We have some sauna enthusiasts, are 12%. The majority are people thinking about starting a sauna business. Well done, you guys. Stay in the room, keep learning, keep going. We're cheering you on. Like Adam was saying, the pie is bigger than the screen we're on. It is not really small. So collaboration over competition. And thank you to you folks in the room, our 27% who are currently doing it, who are on the ground making it happen and making those things real. You guys are going to be really helpful for Jim here. Of you've actually walked through all those permitting processes, right? You've got an ability to get over the top and to say, hey, we've figured out how to do that. We've figured out how to get that into the world. I will say, Jim, just to begin with on that, we actually, because the US doesn't have a language for this, the permitting can be difficult because there are people in regulatory areas that need to be educated on it. And the person who's responsible to do the educating is actually you as the business owner who wants to start something. And my example for this is whenever we do something new, we do a whole bunch of work on the front end to make sure the people that need to get a sign off understand what we're up to. And we're showing them that it's not a risky endeavor. It is not uncommon to go jump in cold water in a public setting in a lot of places in Europe. In the US, natural water cold plunging can be very difficult to get the okay. One way that we've done that is we've invested and we have like a 9-page cold water immersion document along with a very safe constructed cold plunge to help people get in and get out, because the US is very litigious. So there's a lot of work to go on sort of doing the groundwork in your area. And there's some questions about who's on your team to figure that out. Who are the local regulators, decision makers? Start finding those things out. And then you're going to start seeing what problems in your area. There might be some places where it's going to be very, yep, we want to do this. We understand. Here's the bodies that you need to get the sign-offs from the health department, from local permitting. And in other areas, you're going to have a lot more flexibility. So your question is super wide and broad. Let's get into the nitty-gritty on that on another date. And we have a whole lot of resources for that. Adam, would you say anything else to that as you are thinking about opening tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of square feet? You guys have to think sort of strategic planning years and years out, where you're getting on like city, you're working with the city of DC to get on their radar to say, we want to make a big investment like this. Do you have any thoughts for Jim on that sort of regulating, licensing kind of conversation in any way?
I mean, let me come at it from two ways that are very specific to our experience. I think the first is really educating people on the public benefits of what you're bringing. This is not a typical business. This is something that actually has community impacts that are very positive. And I think that what has really helped speed some of the discussions we've been having with city governments, both in DC and elsewhere in the country, is about the breadth of people who are served, about how you help to revitalize downtowns and bring new activity, especially in a world of Amazon and Uber Eats and Netflix and a lot of the traditional gathering place uses in cities are really struggling. The other way I would come at it, which again is a little specific to us and is about translating a European track record into an American context, is around our water treatment. So actually, we use very, very minimal amounts of chlorine in our pools. Most of the treatment is done by ozone. And we've invested a lot in technology to basically create an enormous bathing environment where you don't smell any chlorine. And we know this is going to be a challenge for us coming into the US. The chlorine limits, the requirements are much higher. So this is an area where, as we start to advance into the sort of pre-development and planning, pre-construction stages, we're going to be taking a much closer look at how can we maybe advocate for some adjustments to that. And some of the people I was speaking to in the Southwest when I was in Colorado last week have been very much on the front end of similar conversations around use of geothermal water. Again, something that, regulators are like, oh my goodness, let's just pump as much chlorine into this as possible, which obviously completely contradicts the entire point and the entire benefits of what you're trying to do and bring.
Love it. Pools that smell like chlorine, the chlorine's working, which means they're dirty, right? And so I think that is a key point. And I think the one other thing I'll say here, Jim, on this is it is different in every area. and in the US, it can get down to the county and city, and it like there isn't a standard that's broad. And there are some people that are figuring this out. Sean's over here in the chat saying, "Hey, we've been in the trenches for 3 years on this. Happy to share what they've learned. Go check out Plunge in Utah. They're doing some great work. PLUNJ." And I think there's on this. I want to like double down on the safety and the regulatory side. We should be doing this work, because if we don't do this work and we guerrilla warfare this into the public, what we will likely see is tarnishes on public bathing for the US. We'll see the headlines being the wrong headlines, not the headlines of look at these amazing folks that are doing this. We're going to see the headlines of thermic bathing facility gets closed down by health department. Sauna burns down and people injured. Like, if we are all honest about trying to do this and serve communities and make impact broadly and do this for a long time, take the long view, do the hard work, get the sign off, do it safely. It will take longer, but it will be very, very, very worth it in the end. You get so much more buy-in, and then it helps move the needle for everybody else. It actually creates the opportunity for more of this to work. And so great question, Jim. Let's keep working on it. You guys, we are flying through. I'm really excited that there's a lot of like general, this has been helpful. We've seen some good comments. Feeling inspired from all of this. Thank you, everyone, says Kate. As we wrap our time, let's make sure if you got any burning questions, shoot them over. We're going to make sure we end right on the hour. We have a few minutes left. Adam, let's talk about the future. What is coming? What are these things that are happening that you're excited about? And give us a little look into your crystal ball and say, what are the next things ahead for us? And maybe keep that inspiration going, or make sure we're grounded as we go into the future.
Well, why don't I start by just saying one thing, which is, there's an amazing community that is coming up within the professional context of this that, you have been a real leader in. And so, I'm just excited for all of us to start to deepen these bonds, because I think the more any of us succeed, the more all of us succeed. I think any industry at an early stage in a new, context like bathing in the US, collaboration is going to be key, because, 95% of your customers are still not aware about what this is and how amazing it is. And so the more we can all do to collaborate and elevate the awareness, I think the better we'll all do. And that's something that really excites me, because I have a sense of an incredible community that is coming together. And I would encourage all of you, to reach out to me on Instagram or via email, and, let's get together if you're coming through New York. I just think there's, an amazing amount of knowledge and that we can share with each other. And a lot that we can do by collaborating together. In terms of a few specific things that I'm really excited to see, maybe let me mention 3. One is, I think there's a big opportunity for more regional differentiation and regional sort of expression of what sauna and bathing can mean in different parts of North America. And so, I'm seeing a lot of franchises rolling out now across the country, but I also want to see those small, only in that place could that sauna concept work and exist, whether it's about the integration with the landscape, with the culture, with the architecture, with the food. I think that there's a lot, that can still be done. And I think it's the small independent operator who's going to chart that course. The second thing is around community and sort of how can we shift our perception of these spaces as not just recreational, but as almost like core public services. And that is something that is very understood in Europe. There's even, integration with public health systems, for these kinds of facilities. I think there's a long way to go in the US towards that, but it's something that I want to help push forward as well. Maybe the last thing, which is kind of a different line of thought, is I'm really excited to see sauna and bathing start to permeate into popular culture in the US. And I think we're not quite there yet. If you think about Japan, you've got, Spirited Away, my favorite film ever. If you think about Russia, there's a film that all Russians watch on New Year's Eve every year that is all about, it starts in a banya, and that's core to the premise. We haven't seen that, I think, in North America yet, around a bathhouse or a sauna experience becoming something that is just part of mass culture. I don't think it's impossible, but I'm excited to see, how we're going to get there. And I think this group and all of us working in this space can also help work together to bring our culture to that point.
So good. So good. I want that future to happen. You guys, we are wrapping our time. There are so many good questions flying in. We're not going to be able to get to every single area today, but good news is these kinds of conversations are free and open and continuing. And so there is one. Tom just sent over the link to register for our next one next month. And so I just want to highlight, hey, be in the conversation, continually be in the conversation with us as we keep going in on all these things. We're actually going to deep dive on a lot of these additional topics as we go. Today was really about what is the landscape? Now, if you're asking some questions that are more deeply focused on specifics, dive in with us and join us. We're actually going to talk next month, June 5th, same time, same place, right on Zoom, understanding some of business models that work from mobile rentals to immaculate bathhouses. This is the scale question, but also how do we understand the business models underneath that? We're bringing on Annette Scott, who is on the call today. Annette's there. She is the owner of Kodawari Studios and founder of Revivery, which is a franchising sauna concept that's starting to happen. And just to highlight what Annette's doing, because somebody had asked this question in the chat, I think it was Alan, how the heck do we do this in warm climates? How do we do this in the South? How do we, everybody responds to, and I've heard this 1,000 times, Alan, I'm so with you. A sauna outside in insert state that's warm, why wouldn't you just go outside? And Annette is doing this in Tampa, Florida right now and just crushing it, just doing really amazing work, serving her community. And I would say it's because there are deep values in this experience that are not weather related. The more you talk about this as a seasonal sport, the more you've just created a seasonal business that only ties to seasonal things. And if up here in Minnesota, if I started doing that, I'd have a lot of great work in the winter, and then I'd go on vacation in the summer. The water is always cold here in Duluth. So come join, be a part of it in all seasons. So I'm going to say that. And then to dive in on one more thing here, you guys, if you're one of those people who are thinking about starting a sauna business, we do want to invite you, if you're ready, if you're wanting to go deeper in any of this, if these questions are really like top of mind for you, we actually have a group. We've already worked with 70 plus businesses through our Sauna Business Accelerator. And what it is a 12-month program that is going to work with you and give you coaching, going to give you industry knowledge, going to give you a small group support network of people, along with a whole bunch of coursework to make sure you can get over the hurdles, to make sure you understand the ways in which business is going to work, to make sure you have somebody that's working through those permitting issues kind of alongside. And I would say maybe more importantly, to make sure you have a clear vision for where you're going, because so often what I actually see in these type of businesses is people start with a little vision and they actually reach it. They get there in like 18 to 24 months. And then they say, well, what's next? And people outrun their vision. What we would want you to do is actually come into a room and learn with some folks to have a vision that's big enough that you could be doing this for the next few decades and really serving tens, hundreds of thousands of people. Heck, Adam just said his group serves 1.5 million people a year. What if that was happening in the US? And I think we're finding folks and businesses that are doing that. We'd want to invite you to come check this out. The link is in the chat window and we'll send it to you after as well. Our team would be happy to work with you on all those things. Adam, what a joy to have you here today. That's my last pitch. Is there anything that you want to pitch to get people following you on Instagram? Where can they find you? Anything that Therme is doing that you want them to be seeing that people can go check out?
Thanks, Justin. Well, first of all, just thank you so much for inviting me. This has been a blast, and it's been amazing to just see the amount of engagement that's been happening. So I look forward to connecting with many of you. You know, after this, you can reach me on Instagram at @bathing_Adam or adam.tanaka@therme.us. Lots of information about Therme on our website, on our Instagram. Yeah, can't wait to connect. Please reach out and let me know if any of you pass through Brooklyn. Lots of great sauna experiences we can do together here.
All right, you guys, thank you again for being with us here at Cedar and Stone and our webinar series. We want to invite you to come back and have a great, great week. Thank you, you guys, and we'll see you on the next one.
Bye. Thank you.